Welcome back to Ride the Stream. I am Travis Licata, joined by one of my all-time favorite people, Michelle Brittany. We're here. We're here at the season one finale, episode 25, which is called Exodus Part 3. It aired originally May 25th, 2005, which I think is the same air date as Part 2, so it must have been like a 2-hour finale. Um, This is exciting because we have reached the Michelle is new to each episode that we watch.
Mhm.
Um, and before we dive in, Michelle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Here in Arizona, we're already starting to have warmer weather. At the time of recording, this is like late March. I think we are anticipating 95-degree weather. Yeah, holy cow.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I think it peaks today and then it'll, go back down a bit. But I think, now that we are officially into spring, I think warmer temperatures are ahead. It's really bright outside. I can hear the birds singing out there. They probably want food. They'll get it later. But yeah, I'm doing all right. How about for you? I think you had a storm come through yesterday in Baltimore area.
yeah, there's been a little bit of rain. The winds have been coming and going, pretty high gusts. I think Maryland is synonymous with four season weather at any given point. I know it was like a month ago we got snow coverage on the ground, and then the following day it was like there was nothing ever on the ground, and the weather was nice. And
Mhm.
but you know, the kids are excited that it's nicer. They've been outside playing till their
Oh,
heart's
nice.
content the last few weeks. And with the time change, even though daylight savings is brutal, um,
For everybody
there's more.
else,
Yeah, there's
not
yeah, for
Arizona.
everyone else. Yeah. Uh, they enjoy, I mean, especially Megan, my wife, she having more sunlight. Like I'm kind of always been more of a night owl anyway, so the darkness kind of, I mean, she calls me a vampire on the side,
You are
so
pretty light skinned, and I have never met you. I think we always talk at night, right? You're
well, yeah,
in a dark cave.
I only turn this light on for to help the video. Otherwise it would be
Oh,
off.
gotcha.
Um, but yeah, so I'm really looking forward to diving into this. And to everyone that is joining us, thank you for joining us. We'll also do a season one wrap up,
Mhm,
and we are currently debating additional content to add besides Lost. So stay tuned
mhm.
for that. Um, but I know this episode has a lot to dive into. There anything you want to bring up before I dive head first, like Jack, into the synopsis?
Yeah, just for anybody that's keeping track, um, that's Max. He's already solidified his spot for probably the next hour because he was licking and grooming himself for a nappy poo. And then over there is Algernon. So
All right,
anyway,
so
there'll probably be
cat count to
appearances.
two,
Yep, two. Two at the moment. We'll see.
maybe Cecily's
Cecily is
tail,
nearby. Hmm.
maybe Cecily's tail.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how many.
Okay.
Maybe take guesses on how many cat appearances we'll have this week.
Mm,
So
I'll say two more. I'm gonna go.
we'll see. Yeah. Yeah. I imagine Cecily's going to get up. We're at least going to see her tail. Two's probably a good, good guess there.
All right.
But anyway, for the people that like to see the kitty cats, here's our two so
Yeah.
far.
It can only help the algorithm.
That's right. That's right.
All right. If you're okay, I will dive into the synopsis,
Yeah.
and we will then talk about the season finale.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. So there's the dynamite hatch mission. There's the boat off to find rescue. There's Saeed and Charlie hoping to save Claire's baby Aaron. And there are flashbacks highlighting most of the castaways finding their way onto Oceanic 8 Flight Team that led to their ultimate island vacation. The flashbacks highlight Hurley's bad luck as a fuse is blown in his hotel room, meaning he wakes up late and has to make a mad dash to the airport so he doesn't miss his flight and his mother's birthday the next day. His rental car even dies on him, so he runs and runs. And once he checks in, he runs and runs some more until he offers an older person who just had hip surgery $1,600 to borrow his motorized wheelchair. He makes it to the gate, but the gate is closed, so he pleads with the agent to let him on the plane. And once she makes a call and opens the door, she tells him it's his lucky day. Hurley gives her the biggest hug in the world.
So sweet.
Yeah, she has the biggest smile on her face.
Yes, she does.
Back to the islands, Saeed and Charlie, in their race to find Russo, come across what looks like a baby wrapped in a blanket. Charlie is ecstatic, but Saeed warns him to stop, and he doesn't, and it's a trap. And it releases a ton of big rocks onto Charlie. Sorry, I'm laughing, causing a massive gash on his head. Saeed tells him he has to go back, but Charlie essentially tells him that there's not a chance in hell he's going back without the baby. After telling Charlie he's not a doctor, Charlie says, "You're a soldier. What do you do if a soldier gets hurt in the field of battle?" He probably wishes he didn't ask him that because Saeed opens up a bullet, pours the gunpowder onto Charlie's thick gash, and then sets it aflame with a match. And Charlie screams bloody murder. They eventually discover the source of the black smoke at night and hear the baby nearby. They shout for Danielle to come out, and she tells them the others weren't there. Charlie calls her a nut job and pathetic, while Saeed gently asks for the baby back. Despite Charlie accusing her of setting the fire herself and that there aren't any others, she says that she heard them whispering and that they were coming for a child, and more specifically, they were coming for the boy.
Mhm.
She's emotionally devastated, and Saeed and Charlie return to the caves without Danielle, but with the baby to Claire's ultimate delight. Saeed lets Charlie have this moment with her, and Claire notices the injuries to Charlie, but we also see that one of the statues filled with heroin is in Charlie's bag. And we also see Shannon rush to Saeed and embrace him in a hug, glad to have him return. On the boat, Jin repairs the rudder while he tells Michael what words in English he knows. He then gives Michael the watch that once had them fighting earlier in the season. Later that night, the radar picks up a signal, but when Sawyer and Walt, excuse me, pick up a signal, Sawyer demands Michael to use the flare gun, even, even threatening to take it. Michael doesn't know what to do, but Sawyer and Walt are shouting that the beeping is almost going away, so he decides to fire the flare into the night sky. Uh, After the beeping gets closer to them, they stare out into the dark waters when a bright spotlight flashes onto the boat. Everyone cheers and they start telling them how they were on a plane crash and all this and that. And that's when the rescuers tell Michael, Jin, and Sawyer that they need to give them the boy. And after the confusion wears off and Michael tells them they're not getting anyone, the spotlight turns off and all hell breaks loose. Sawyer draws his gun but gets shot, falling into the water, which Jin jumps in after him. Men board the boat, grabbing Walt, beating up Michael, eventually throwing him off the raft, and they throw a makeshift bomb onto the boat and it erupts into flames. Walt screams for his dad to help, while Michael can only watch from the water and scream his son's name. Back on the island, John, Jack, Kate, and Hurley, the mysterious monster finds them quickly. It first appears with an unusual sound and there's an image of black smoke tailing off in the wind. Trees get uprooted and they set off running after setting down their backpacks full of explosives. Except for Locke, who decides to go towards the monster. Jack rushes back to him, but Locke soon finds himself face to face with this monster, which is similar to earlier in the season, but this time Locke's face is covered in fear. We
Hmm.
watch Locke run for his life until the monster eventually grabs him and starts to drag him away. Jack races after him, diving head first and grabbing onto his arms while the monster attempts to pull Locke underground. Jack tells Kate to grab the dynamite that's in his bag because he switched it even though he didn't draw a short straw. Shocking move by Jack, I'm sure, but Locke tells him to let him go and that he'll be fine. Jack tells Kate to throw a stick of dynamite into the hole while John continues to state the opposite. She does, and the explosion causes the monster to scream, and we again see black smoke appear in the air before retreating. Jack confronts John about his behavior, wanting to know why he was willing to be killed, but Locke believes he would have been fine because he was being tested by the island. He tells Jack that's why he doesn't see eye to eye with him because Jack is a man of science while John is a man of faith. He believes they were all brought to this place by the island and they each have a purpose. Jack looks at John with such contempt and disgust and tells him he doesn't believe in destiny, to which John says, "Yes, you do. You just don't know it yet." Ultimately, they make it back to the hatch, set the explosives, set some wire and a fuse before Locke is about to light it. Hurley drops his flashlight, and when he picks it up, he notices his cursed numbers imprinted on the side of the hatch: 4, 18, 15, 16, 23, 42. He screams at them not to light the fuse and that they can't do it, that the numbers are cursed. Locke hears this and, of course, lights the fuse. Hurley gets closer to the soon to be blasted hatch, stomping on the fuse to no avail, and Jack has to literally pull him down to the ground right before the massive explosion blasts all around them. They all stand and approach a damaged section of the hatch. John and Jack push the noticeably heavy piece of metal to the side. As John and Jack are fixated, looking into the hole, the camera continues to look at them as it drops into the hole, looking upwards. And as John and Jack get smaller the farther the camera drops, we all see just how far the rabbit hole goes. And that's the season one finale.
Good job.
So I'm stoked to hear your thoughts. There's a lot that seemed to happen in this episode. Um, Multiple storylines. First impressions about this, all all the things that happen here.
Well, as usual, and you know, we have talked about it throughout the entire first season is the payoffs with various clues that we get through the episodes. We definitely get that again here through the flashbacks and just with all kind of the main characters coming together on the flight, including like Arndt is there. When he helps Claire with her luggage into the overhead bin. Um, I felt that it was a very fast-paced episode. Again, answering some of our questions, but raising many more. Um, I felt like because the entire episode was go, 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 it was so tense filled. Um, I kind of put in my notes that it was adventuring to the extreme. One could say a horrific adventure as well. I think I was most surprised. I wasn't expecting Walt to be grabbed. I really thought that the others had kind of, playing into that the other were on the island. I never thought that well, and I guess I should say, I'm going by the assumption that the others are the ones that went out and grabbed Walt, and that they weren't there to get Claire's boy, or they would have, except they figured it would have been so difficult to get Claire's boy, and the fact that they saw the raft leave. and that there was only the four of them, it was easier to overpower them. So, yeah, I was surprised by Walt getting nabbed, but watching how Danielle says, well, the whispers told me that they were going for the boy, and she assumed that it was the baby boy, not Walt.
Yeah.
Um, so that was pretty well played. I felt that when the group on the raft were like all excited, just the way that the one guy was talking, I was like, this is not good. Just kind of his
Yeah.
tone, what he was saying. I was like, oh yeah, this is not going to end well. So, um, yeah, I kind of felt the way that went was not going to be good. And now we're left with a lot of like, did Sawyer actually get shot? Was Sawyer able to shoot anybody before he went into the drink? The fact that Jun went after Sawyer will probably help them, but the fact that all three of them are in the water, and I got to thinking that how far away are they from the island? Will they be able to also see the fire? Will they be able to swim back to the island? Will there be enough debris so that they can get back to the island? Because at this point, I'm like, what's going to happen to them? Are they going to
Yeah.
become shark food? Were they really 15 miles out? I don't know. Given the fact that the island is so mysterious, they could be, Michael could be wrong about the 15 miles and it's all, you know, not real, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I am kind of thinking they're gonna end up back at the island at some point. But then they're gonna have to figure out where Walt is. But I think he'll be on the island too. I think all of them are going to be back to the island because I think that's what the big cauldron or huge torch on the beach is actually all about. It's a beacon for the others so they can get back. Um,
Oh, that makes sense.
yeah. But I do have, lots of questions. Will they be able to get back to the island? Will Charlie start using again? Um,
Oh, that was so
that,
heartbreaking to see that in his bag.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I felt, oh, please don't use again. You got through all this stress and tension and all the ups and downs without, please don't go back.
Yeah.
Um, but I also thought, we all always have that kind of balance, the yin and the yang. So I thought that the flashbacks were helpful. I mean, obviously, Hurley really bucking the luck to get on that plane and how everything was telling him you're not supposed to get on that plane. Don't get on the plane because he doesn't have bad luck, right? But everybody around him does. So, yeah, the fact that he was able to get on the plane. But I did like the last flashback of all the passengers, actually, all the players coming together. I
Yeah.
really, really liked that. I thought the music was well done. And it really kind of tied everything together for the end of the season by getting to see all the characters and what they were looking like. Claire, rolling her eyes because the guy, really didn't get out of her way, even though she's, 7, 8 months pregnant or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can tell she's like trying to put a brave smile on. But, at the end of the day, here's an uncaring schmuck who doesn't give her the space so that she can easily get by.
Yeah.
Um, basically think, what an asshole. And how many times have we actually seen that happen?
Yeah.
To the other end of the spectrum, at three, where Arnst actually helps her with her bag to get it stowed away. Kate and the marshal coming, her hands and her wrists under the jacket so that people don't see she's being brought in, in handcuffs. Sawyer coming in just full of anger and, you know, carrying the weight of the world on his
Yeah.
shoulders as he walks down the aisle. Jack accommodating, tired. He sees Locke, gives him a small smile, and Locke kind of gives him one back. Charlie, the angsty musician, trying to stow his guitar and being impatient, and the glasses, so people don't see that he's strung out. Saeed, where the white guy a couple of seats at the
Oh,
other end makes the snap judgment that, oh, he's a terrorist. What the heck, are we gonna make it? Type of look. Um,
yeah.
to then Saeed looking at a photo of Nadia. Jun and Son, with Jun looking at the father-in-law's watch and what it represents, both a chain and, you know, the chance for freedom. Michael putting the seatbelt on Walt because he's too busy with his video game to pay any attention. Shannon and Boone, she's trying to find her inhaler, which was a nice nod to the episode with the inhaler. And we get to see Boone, handing it to her because, of course, he's there. He knows what she needs. He's always been that for her. And of course, Hurley giving Walt this big friendly thumbs up and tongue hanging out his side, like, "Oh, I made it," and that just makes Walt smile, and it's so sweet.
What a great
And then,
moment.
yeah, and then Hurley is actually the one with that comic book that's in Spanish. He's the one that had the comic book. And of course, the music's beautiful, a little bit nostalgic and melancholy all at the same time. And just how nicely that transitions to the very end scene where, you know, the Locke and Jack are looking down into the rabbit hole. Just beautifully done, and really sets, you know, us wanting, all right, give me season two. And of course, back in the day, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, you would have had to wait like 4 months or something before you get to see,
Yeah.
episode one of season two. So you get to stew all summer long about, this three-part finale. So a lot of I, I I don't mean it to sound derogatory in any way, but it's kind of a lot of the same that we've had, just kind of ramped up because we're on the go. I felt so tuckered out over the three episodes, and particularly, here we have another one that's on the go. Um, and just so much unknown. We learn a lot, but we're also left with a lot of questions at the end, and they do it so well. So,
Yeah, there's so much tension and pacing.
hmm
Um, and it happens not just between one or two main storylines. There's three, Charlie and Saeed racing to find the baby, and then we have the Hatch dynamite crew, and then you have the raft.
yeah.
Um, and each element, there's tension at a given point, that the sequence with Charlie and the gunpowder and hearing him scream in pain. Would not want to be him. Um, and on the raft, Sawyer threatens Michael, and Michael's just blunt, like, what are you gonna do? Shoot me.
hmm
Um, and even though Michael fires the flare,
Yeah.
I think it ultimately comes down to, I think Walt is anxious and he's like, it's gonna go away. He's like, come on. So I think Michael, yes, Sawyer's telling him to fire the flare, but I think he's listening to Walt there too.
Yeah.
Um, which we've talked about, shows how advanced their relationship has come from the beginning.
Yeah.
I do find in that scene something so interesting when they fire the flare and the beeping comes back. All right, four. Um, they're celebrating, but Jin isn't. He tells them to shush
Mm-hmm.
and to listen, which I that was my first. Well, that was like an uh-oh feeling. Like I know you mentioned like the crew of the boat and the guy's demeanor and the way he was talking was off.
Yeah.
That was like the precursor to that, where it was like Jin was so focused on being able to identify whatever is around them
Yeah.
that it just made me think, oh, what is around them? Like,
Yeah.
um, so even in a moment like that, that was tense. Um, and then with the hatch crew,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're being chased and pulled by the monster to the tension of setting the dynamite onto the hinges of the hatch. Um, and the flashback sequence is with Hurley is probably the lightest, even though it's go, 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 go.
Mm-hmm.
But that happens early on. So there isn't the usual, or I don't feel like there is the usual super lighthearted moment to help bridge that gap. And even like the scene with Claire and Charlie at the end where it's like, oh, that should be so nice. But then you see the statue and you're like, no, like,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, but I do think probably the one of the more lighthearted scenes is Shannon searching for Saeed when he um they get back and she just embraces him and like a hug similar to the way Hurley gives the flight attendant or the flight crew hug.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's whether she was worried or just happy to see him back, I'm not sure, but it's clear that she is um emotionally connected to Saeed, um, which that was nice to see.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I was happy
uh,
to see that as well because I felt like in the prior episode they were mending fences and they were coming together. So it was nice when she appeared and she was obviously looking for him and you know going and embracing him of her own accord. She was motivated to do that, thereby definitely healing some fences there that she put up to keep him away. So that was very nice, and I think it's nice to see that since I think the other kind of relationship that we had that kind of solid at least for a while was Sun and Jen, even though they were bouncing. We have interesting and insightful, I think, relationships, across the board, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, brother, sister, father, son, that kind of thing. It's very interesting to see how they all evolve over the first season.
absolutely. And talk about full circle with Michael and Jen.
Hmm.
Um, from earlier in the season, like fighting over the
Yeah,
watch
yeah.
to where Jen gives Michael the watch. And I
Hmm.
think the actor who plays Michael, I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but his response, his reaction is so genuine. He's stunned
Yeah.
by what that means because Michael understands that the watch is a place of honor for Jen, and for Jen to give it to him like
Hmm.
highlights the connection that they have. And I think that scene is wonderful. It's very quick. Like it doesn't last very long, but it speaks volumes. And I think you're right. This episode kind of highlights some of these full circle moments or the relationships that have evolved throughout the season. Um, and further highlighting scenes or moments from this episode are, is there a favorite of yours? Do you have a running tally like your
Smooth,
partner in
smooth.
crime?
Well, I have a list of three, because I felt like there was three very pivotal, insightful, kind of driving scenes. I think Michael talking with Jen about the dictionary, which happens just before um, Jen gives Michael the watch. I felt like this really is kind of a wonderful structure and pattern that the writers use throughout the series so far. And that is that they take something that seems like kind of a small thing, a little detail, they expand it, and then right at the end, they pack the punch. And I think this scene is great for really um, displaying that kind of technique that they use. It starts with Michael seeing the dictionary, that Sun has written for Jun. And, he asks him, like, well, what does all these words mean? And so then Jun says, well, we get the starboard, aft, port. And then he kind of chuckles, eat, which was so sweet, and Michael is genuinely like, I don't want to say envious in a jealous way, but envious in a respectful way that their relationship, that even though they were having bumps, Son made this dictionary, and Michael even says, oh, I wish he would have made one for me because
Yeah.
it shows that he actually wants to be able to communicate with Jun. And wow, does not show a lot of uh ev evolution to that relationship that we've seen be chaotic and violent and stressful. Um, so I really like that. And then of course, you know, it helps him get to that point where Jen gives him the watch and it's a place of honor and everything that it represents. And it really helps us to think and remember all the details along the way and how that delivers that big punch that the writers are hoping for that you'll pick up on.
Yeah.
And I really like that. That's one of my favorite scenes. The other is when, and I know we'll this is probably one of your favorites too, but when Locke and Jack discuss the concept of fate and destiny. I really think that really kind of solidifies the struggles we've been having between the two characters, that being that Jack is very science oriented. He's about measuring, it's empirical. Um, he's looking for something that he can measure and repeat versus Locke, which is fundamental, as we've talked in other episodes, the concept of belief and religion, philosophy, the more touchy-feely, and why fundamentally they're at odds with each other because they're not on the same plane. They're not in the same rational sphere. They're each rational, but in different ways.
Yeah.
And they're not on the same page because they don't believe in the same things. Jack, who is very scientific and in the realm of science, can't fathom the idea that an island, a place, God can, manipulate destiny or fate. And he ultimately is unable to see that there is a destiny, there is a path. And, I feel like Locke really kind of well, he really does explain his belief in a way that you can see, yes, what step you take today is going to create a fate, a path, a certain destiny because you didn't go that way. I think the other part of that scene is when Jack said, did you talk to Boone about this? And you can see the pain in Locke's face. You can see that he's had to come to terms and to find the logic of why Boone is no longer there. And that he says that Boone was a necessary sacrifice that the island demanded, which is hard to take if you're somebody in science because you can't replicate that. You can't, there isn't a way to really kind of understand that. And Jack, who is amazingly understanding about things and accommodating, won't accommodate Locke to that point. So they're going to continue to be at odds. And we kind of go into the third scene that I felt was really, really important. And that is the conversation that you mentioned earlier, where Jack says, everybody wants me to be the leader. But as soon as I make a decision that you're not happy about, you're mad at me, you know. And I mean, he puts it out there on the line, which I think is great. And it I feel like these scenes really give us what we're thinking about throughout the entire season and these various points in the relationship that come together and we see them and then they go off again and then they interweave again. And that is Jack says, if you want to second guess, that's your call. But at the end of the day, we survive this night, we're going to have a lock problem. And this shows the other side of the struggle that Locke and Jack have. And it comes down to Jack's feeling that he has to have people on his side. And right away, he asks Kate, are you going to have my back? You know, even though we can be at odds for this or that, and you can
Yeah.
second guess my decisions, are you going to have my back? And she looks over at Locke, and Locke is standing there, and the angle is like a low shot looking up, and she turns back to Jack and says, I have your back. And I think each one of those scenes are kind of pivotal, um, particularly relating to Locke, Jack, and Kate, and that immediate, real strong core.
Yeah.
And then I think, Michael and John and even Sawyer, the fact that they're kind of creating that core. I almost feel like we're getting, like they're drifting these ways and kind of setting the bar of or setting the paths that we're going to see in season two. These different cores. Um, so those for me are the three scenes that really stood out for me. I can't because there is so much going on, it's really hard to say definitive, this is it,
Yeah.
for me. What
Yeah.
about for you?
Um, well, any of the scenes with Jack and John, they just seem, especially when Jack is, what's the right word? When he just so does not like John. And but you can feel the intensity of those moments. And like you mentioned, I feel like Locke is just trying to be sincere about his intentions, what he believes, what he thinks they're all there for, which is
Hmm.
some purpose that they've yet to identify, which is, or maybe leading to the hatch. Um, and like you just kind of feel that combativeness, which I do feel to a degree is one-sided. Like Jack's, he's like, I'm not gonna follow you anywhere. Like, I think
Hmm.
he thinks Locke is just crazy at this point. Um, although I will admit, I was surprised when Locke, not that he lit the fuse, but as Hurley's running towards the fuse, Locke runs the opposite direction. He's usually pretty good about helping people like stay out of harm. And in
Hmm.
that instance, I was like, wow, he he runs away from the blast, lets Hurley go willy-nilly towards the hatch, and Jack saves the day. So
Yeah.
that was a surprise. As far as other scenes that you have, uh, let's see, the boat scene where Walt is taken. I'm not going to list it as my favorite or most interesting because it's terrifying to think about your child being taken.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
I couldn't put
and
it up there because it was like it is a pivotal moment and I think it will have driving force in season two. But yeah, like you, I'm like, no, that was devastating. A devastating
it's
thing.
such a dramatic scene.
Hmm.
Like seeing Sawyer fall off, and Jen is just like right in after him to try to save him.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that scene. I thought one of the scenes, just seeing what looks to be the black wisp of air or smoke or whatever as the monster was interesting because
Hmm.
to this point there hasn't been really a visual other than seeing trees uprooted or knocked down. Um, so seeing that was cool. I have to give credit to the Hurley's flashback, the whole like successful journey to a doomed flight. I-
Yeah,
it
that's
just
true.
and he just has like that final scene where he's looking at Walt and give him the thumbs up, and he's so happy. He makes Walt smile, and he sits down. He puts on the headphones, which I guess were the ones he was using before.
Hmm. Yep.
And seeing the comic book, that's really cool. The end scene with them, the camera going down, looking up at Jack and John, looking down the hole.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Shannon, just that brief moment of her looking for him and giving him a hug, it's very emotional. Like it just when you see two people who clearly care about each other and they're able to like kind of reconnect, even though they I don't think they were gone very long. It just states to the I guess the importance that Saeed is to her,
Hmm.
um, which is a big deal. Um, the drastic uh, medic scene with Saeed and Charlie, I can't even imagine like how devastatingly painful that is. Um, but Charlie's determined. He's like, I'm not going back. You have to fix me.
I love
And
the comment that he makes when he's gonna light it and he's like, "Oh, this is gonna be painful." And he's like, "Are you doing this because I hit you?"
yeah.
I'm like, there and Saeed didn't answer. I love that.
Yes. But I do think my top scene is I agree with you. I think I will say one of yours. My top scene is the Jin and Michael exchange.
Hmm.
Um, from him talking about the dictionary to the watch exchange.
Hmm.
It just talks about it's just one example, like we said before, the evolution of relationships. Um, and from where they started, Jin racing down the beach, hitting Michael from behind and looking like he's going to kill him in the water.
Hmm.
Um, to this point, it seems like the most unlikely thing to happen.
Yeah.
Um, I haven't thought about it, but just at the top of my head, it's like I couldn't have imagined starting this season, seeing that happen, and then think that they are best friends by
Hmm.
the end. And I totally agree with you. I don't think Michael's comments are in any way like bad in an envious way. It's like I think he appreciates what Son did for him. And I think you're right. I think he wishes he could speak with Jen better because they're somehow able to communicate even though they don't necessarily understand each other,
Yeah.
which is amazing. So I love that they're able to do that. And even when um, Sawyer's trying to argue about the flare, and then Michael and Jen start talking, even though we don't know what they're saying necessarily. And Sawyer's like, "Hey, do you want to clue me in on what you guys are talking about?" Like,
Yeah.
um, so I just love that exchange. I think it's great. Um, I think that that along with the Shannon hug are probably the most lighthearted scenes, other than like Hurley's race through the airport and um,
What's the old commercial? Was it O.J. Simpson with the Samsonite luggage running through the airport? I really got that kind of sense.
oh, maybe,
So, yeah,
but
it just made me kind
yeah,
of think of a like achieving the impossible, like it ought to be this long commercial. And it was a long flashback.
yeah, that might have been the longest scene of the episode because I think they just ran it from the beginning all the way to him
Yeah.
hugging the flight crew at the end. Poor Hurley.
Oh,
He felt so good about it.
and I have to say how humiliating polite the ticket counter woman was.
Oh,
Oh yes, dear, this and that. How condescending, and to make him buy another ticket because of his size. And I'm like, we know that exists.
yeah.
And it was so hurtful.
And she
Um,
even throws it at him. Do we need to weigh you?
yeah. And
Ugh,
the look on Hurley's face, kind of like that when she's like, oh, well, because of your size, you need to buy a second. I really expected her to say, well, we don't have any seats to accommodate you to buy a second seat type of thing. And I'm just like, how humiliating that is for a person of his size, his stature, that he is required to buy a second ticket.
yeah.
I just was like, that's kind of a subtle statement about society. And I mean, we even get that with Arntz when he's like, hey, where are you packing the carbs? How are you still the same size that you were
Yeah.
when we got here a month ago? Just so disrespectful.
Yeah. It's a brutal reality. And also, um, you get that sense of humiliation. Not that Locke should feel this way, but when they can't find the whatever automated wheelchair to get him on to the airplane,
Yes, that
and
was another point.
he's just like, "There's not like, what do you mean I can't get on the plane? Because there's not another flight until tomorrow." And the
Yeah.
guy, one of the guys suggests him and someone else carrying him on, and you can tell that the notion of that John doesn't like, but
Mhm.
he just, acquiesce. He says that's fine. And as he's getting carried on, the look on his face, he's kind of like looking around and he doesn't want to be carried on. And
Yeah.
it just, so that was, uh,
Yep.
you know, difficult to see knowing how it made him feel. Um, but he still told him, thank you for doing it. And,
Mhm.
you know, um,
It also
yeah,
showed why nobody knew that he couldn't walk either when he got,
right.
because I was like looking and he was like one of the first ones that was put on the plane. So the fact that where he was sitting, he would have been one of the first people. Um, so I was thinking the fact that, well, that's why nobody knows that well, if they saw him carried in, then they would know something.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, the fact that it's a needed statement about society and how we treat people that are not that are bigger. or people that are disabled, um, or, challenged. I don't know what is the best term, but when they don't fit the mold that society expects, there's no real, I think hopefully, we as a society have gotten better about that, but I know that that prejudice still exists in so many ways. And that was just two examples,
Yeah.
in the episode when there's many, many others.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Uh,
well, we had
um,
language barrier in the prior one with the couple behind Sun and Jun thinking, oh, well, they don't understand us because we're speaking English.
yeah. That makes it all better.
Oh, yeah, we could say
Yeah, of
whatever we
course.
want.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Um, well, to switch back to a quick lighter note, when Hurley
Mhm.
is at the elevator in the hotel, he's looking at the crowded elevators like, ah,
There's Charlie.
like there's not enough room. I'm gonna go to the stairs, and you just hear Charlie like, some of us have a flight to catch. It's just,
Yep.
um, oh, so saying all of that, and
Mhm.
the flashbacks or the different scenes, do you have a character that stands out the most to you?
God, no. I don't have one. I have nine. But I
Hey.
have them grouped, if that helps at all. So to me, I felt like, and it really follows the storyline because I feel that Jack, Kate, Locke, and Hurley are kind of one entity of a character. And their exchange, which I think, stand out for that four. Then I think Michael Chun and Sawyer in particular, the conversations and the dialogues that they have with each other, and how it shows um, the changes of their relationships, the dynamic of the relationships over the course of the season. And then I think Saeed and Charlie, they've been on good terms and then they fell apart for a bit, but now they've come back and they've spilt blood together, let's say that.
Yeah.
So I feel like Saeed gets it. It was good guy, good cop, bad cop in a way. And Saeed, trying to kind of guide the situation in, through his kind of good cop, while Charlie was pretty damaging and damning with his comments to Danielle.
Oh yeah.
And that was hard to watch, I think. So I did feel like those three groups with those characters all stood out for me. So yeah, I copped out again.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I,
No complaints here. I always come with a running list of
I
every question.
I
So,
did the Trevor list. At least I grouped them. So you grouped too. So, but were you able to say yes without a doubt, or did you also kind of struggle with kind of finding if there was one character that stood out for you?
so this time I decided, okay, I'm gonna pick characters opposite from my favorite scene, which I
Okay.
don't always do. But I showed Jen and Michael some love.
Hmm.
So then I was like, okay, who does that leave with? I didn't mention Jack and John because there's such a headbutting going on there, um, that I just don't like. So I was like, okay, that leaves, um, and I feel for Kate because she, she won, she felt like she earned responsibility to carry the dynamite, you
Yeah.
know. And, Jack kind of, takes it away from her, you know, doesn't care that that's how they said they would do it.
Yeah.
We can get to that. So it was between Hurley, Saeed, and Charlie.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's really hard to pick between the three. Um, but if I'm gonna lean to someone, um, I feel like I'm gonna give it to Hurley
Hmm.
just because the flashback is great. He is trying to do everything he can to not miss a flight. That to all the signs, if we're gonna talk like mythic nature of the island and signs and potential curses and whatever whatnot, like there was something about him not making that flight. Like fuses blew in the hotel room. His car dies, just like shuts down. He books his ticket in the wrong terminal, or he's in the wrong terminal when he books the ticket. But he's trying so hard. He
Hmm.
he's so happy by the end. The look he gives Walt, it just and even in the present day on the island when John calls him Hugo,
Yeah.
and I was surprised by that.
Yep.
And he Locke asks him to carry the rest of the sticks in the bag away from the explosion site, and he's just like, me? And then when he gets the bag, he's holding the torch and he asks Jack for a flashlight. He's like, yeah, the whole torch and dynamite combo doesn't seem like it
Yeah.
works for me. Um, and then the overabundance of anxiety when he sees the numbers and he's just like, he goes
Yeah.
crazy. Like, don't light the fuse. The numbers are bad. We can't do this. And so there's so much going on with him, mostly with the flashback, which is lighthearted. And then we
Hmm.
see the stress of the numbers come towards the end that I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna give it to Hurley this episode.
Okay. Well, gold star for you for narrowing it down to one.
It was bound to happen once.
Now, Hurley is a good choice. I was thinking of, as you were talking how, he's usually always kind of the even keel person. And how animated he got as soon as he saw those numbers. And it was like all caution went out the window. Um, and he was just like really firmly believed uh, that that was not a good idea. Um, so yeah, he's a good choice, like Hurley. So
And they're doing that, him and Kate are walking through the jungle and he's repeating like the numbers
mhm.
aloud to himself. And Kate hears the number 23 and he's like, well, does 23 mean something to you? And she's
Mhm.
like, well, the dude who sold me out back in Australia did it for a $23,000 reward.
Yeah.
And she asks him if it means anything. He's like, no, just a number.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm like, no, it's not.
yeah. Um, so in some of our episodes, if you're new to Ride the Stream, we do normally those first two questions, favorite scene, favorite character, and sometimes we'll do a third question of like something focused specifically on the episode. Um, so this question um, is why does Jack seem the most antagonistic towards John? And for example, John asks Jack to hold, I think, part of the end of a wire as he's trying to like stack the dynamite and wrap it so it's in place. And Jack's first reaction is just to stare at John as if he's questioning whether or not he should. And then even when John asks for the fuse to set it into the dynamite, Jack just tells him, I'll do it. Like, I know John mentions that they butt heads because of science and faith, but is there anything more to it, you think? Like, why that Jack just is hell bent on being anti John?
I've been thinking about that as we've been chatting, and I'm almost wondering if it's when you have two people that are so similar that they're almost in competition or at odds with each other because they're trying to outdo each other, or um, they're so similar. I almost feel like they're kind of yin and yang. So I feel like they're different, but they're also the same because they both could be leaders. They both have common sense about them. I think that Jack is more, no, excuse me, um, Locke is more the hunter aspect where so he's good at killing versus Jack who's good at as a doctor good at healing or should be, when he's got a full complement of tools and medicine and things like that. So
Yeah.
I do feel that they actually complement each other. Um, and I think maybe that's a little scary, particularly for Jack, and the fact that he does need Locke. But when Locke is talking about fate and the island and destiny, and that's so not necessarily, I just don't think that Jack has thought about that. And then when you're confronted by the person who has experience with guns and knives, and it kind of has a dangerous edge about him. Um, is kind of worrisome for someone who hasn't thought about that before.
Yeah.
But I kept thinking about how that conversation really articulates a lot of what we've discussed over the season. And I do feel like all these key discussions articulates all the things that we've been talking, you and I, but on the greater conversation that was probably being had back in the day when this series was first televised. That we finally have the characters acknowledge what we've been talking about, and articulate it and face it. And I do think that it's unfortunate because I think that they've got or could have respect for each other and could really draw on each other's strengths. But when Locke confines that he really believes that they're there for a reason, which is things that we've again talked about, is that
Yeah.
it's not just coincidence. Um, that now you have to face something like that, and I think it's difficult to face that. We haven't talked a lot about what the security system is. Is it an apparition? Is it a what is that? It looks like a
Yeah.
ghost. It looks evil because it's, a really dark black smoke or something that materializes and disappears. It's not something that we can rationally understand.
Yeah.
So Jack is out of step, versus Locke, who has always been in tune with the island. I don't think Jack still knows that Locke couldn't walk.
Right.
So I think there's more that needs to be revealed there, and maybe they will come back around and hopefully be able to develop a relationship that's stronger and based on their strengths rather than pointing out weaknesses or perceived weaknesses.
Yeah.
Um, it is kind of, you have to frame it and you have to get behind that framing. I don't think Jack was ready about the whole conversation about destiny and fate and the paths. But that concept is as old as time,
Yeah.
honestly. And a lot older than the Socratic oath and all that kind of thing, and understanding the body, which took many millennia or millennia to understand. Because that's not what, if you have a faith-based concept, then you're going to feel that faith was there first over the knowledge of man. So it is an interesting dichotomy that's developing between those two characters. I just don't think that I think they're a lot alike ultimately.
Yeah.
Um, and I think at least Jack is afraid to say that we're a lot alike because I don't think Jack really likes Locke necessarily for things that he's done. And he has a very difficult time because he is in that we should be healing people, not killing people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The conversation that they have where John is talking about science versus faith, and the scene where Jack is trying to help pull Locke up almost parallels the White Rabbit episode where Locke is pulling up
That's
Jack
true.
from the cliff, and they have a similar conversation then when after he pulls him up from the cliff, they're in the jungle sitting, and John or Jack is clearly exhausted, and he asks him about, okay, how would you diagnose yourself or diagnose someone with your symptoms? But John goes further and says, well, say it's a hallucination that you're seeing your father, but what if you're not?
Yeah.
And and that conversation is exploring the potential of the what if of something that doesn't make sense. Um, where John even talks about in that conversation, I think he says like a meat and potatoes kind of guy. Like he's talks about just like an ordinary, plain view of things. And but I think he describes like he saw the eye of the island and it was beautiful.
Hmm.
And in that moment, I don't know whether because Jack was exhausted or he needed someone to help him find which direction to go on. But Jack was able to take that conversation and let John help him and say, "Hey, don't go back to the camp. You continue whatever you need to do to figure this
Hmm.
out." And then to the season finale, I feel like John is trying to have that a similar conversation, but like you said, Jack just isn't ready or willing to hear what's being said. Um, so it's interesting that like some relationships, like Jin and Michael, have gotten closer, and then for John and Jack to have a pretty close moment early on in the jungle in that whatever episode the White Rabbit one is,
Hmm.
to now where I feel like they're just like like really far apart. Um, and I wish I could pinpoint. I mean, you're probably right that there's probably fear associated with coming face to face with this unknown, and
Hmm.
but you know, there's been talks amongst many people about them surviving and the island being different. And
Yeah.
so that shouldn't be a new conversation, especially given the conversation they had back in whatever episode 5 or 6 that was.
Yeah.
So I do find it interesting that this far into it, there is this continued, I don't know what you call it, but just disgruntledness towards Locke and his way of doing things. And I get it. If you're trying to pull someone off from a hole and they tell you to just drop him, he'll be fine. Sure, that doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
Um, but he gets so. obsessed, where she's done with Kate before, where um he initially told her, "Oh, you don't have to tell me. We all get a new chart." And then how many times
Yeah.
after this, like, "Oh, what happened, Kate? What happened, Kate? What happened, Kate? What made you this way, Kate?" Like,
Yeah.
so there is like this weird, like Jack is very understanding, and he's very capable of like, you know, being in the moment to like make sure people are safe. But then he's very rigid in other sense where he doesn't want to hear other people's responses. And so
Yeah.
it's weird that like there have been so many positive steps with the relationships, but theirs is just completely
Yeah.
um butting heads at the end. So,
You know
and
what
which
I
is
think
weird
it is?
because they're the final thing we see.
Yeah. And you know what I think it is? Good melodrama.
True. Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's
Um
good melodrama and it gives us things to talk about.
that's true. Um are there any other moments from the episode that we haven't talked about that you think
Let's see.
worth mentioning?
Just gonna check my notes. Oh, the uh the blip on the radar felt a lot like a heartbeat to me. I don't know what I was at a loss of like what does the a blip on the radar sound like, but this one definitely sounded like a heartbeat, which I thought was interesting.
Okay.
Um, I think for yeah, the music, I definitely like the music, how well it played um and helped the different scenes, I thought, just kind of emphasize what was going on and what we should feel or, help direct our feelings. Were particularly well done in this episode. So, yeah, I think that's probably it for me. What about you? Anything we missed on
Um,
your side?
I I think I just remember in this watch through just how tough it was to watch a couple scenes.
Hmm.
Um, Walt screaming, "Help me, Dad!" That was oh, that was bad. And then just seeing how distraught Danielle was. I mean, she is just crushed in a way where it's like you just watching her is like, how does she heal?
Yeah.
Um, and so that's why it was great performances, but oof, oh, they're not the easiest thing to watch just because it hits you in a way. It's like, oh, it's awful. So I think those were the things that stood out, even though I avoided talking about them too much.
You've done
So
really well given that, you've seen the entire series and know how things play out. But I'm sure uh, it's been nice to also rewatch and rediscover things that you'd forgotten, because
absolutely.
I know you said that, for you, you kind of started watching it on the weekly schedule, what, season 4. So you were really
Yep,
having to kind of binge to get caught up for season 4. So this has to be probably a nice leisure pace for you as well, that you get to relish each episode a bit more than
absolutely.
that first time.
Love the slow burn
Yeah.
because I mean, we've talked about it. There's so much to take in, and the week to week watching method, like on broadcast TV, I still think, I mean, it just gives you time to connect with characters more because generally there's going to be more episodes in a season, and um, the even sequences where there are some footage of nature with maybe some scenes of characters sitting on the beach for a few seconds before a scene picks up. Like, I don't mind that. Like, I don't mind adding in a few seconds here or there to make the pacing a little slower. I mean, God knows there's enough intense go, go, go scenes throughout the season. So,
Yeah.
I really think the pacing of the show, um, is done so well.
Hmm.
Uh, and it really helps to guide the narrative and amplify the week to week watching where it's just like, whoo, there's a lot to marinate on and take in, and then the look
Yeah.
forward to the next week. So, um, and I think our next episode will be a wrap up.
Yeah. Yep. We'll do our top top three for different categories or something, and just kind of generally recap the entire season and our thoughts of everything that unfolded. So
Yeah,
maybe not hear what our favorite death scene was. I think we all can agree on that one. But there's definitely lots to, uh, revisit and discuss. Um, so,
yeah. Um, well, I guess if anyone is watching, thank you.
yeah,
Um, for anyone who would like to leave a comment and tell us about your favorite character or scene, please feel free to drop in the comments below. Also, be mindful of any newbie to Lost. So if you have a comment of any future episode from this one, just leave a little spoiler alert tag before diving into your comment. And yeah, this is great. This has been so fun. I can't wait to do the wrap up just to get an overall sense that you can kind of like dive into season one and pick apart favorite things and
yeah.
um yeah, this has been so much fun.
Yep. So that'll be next week's vlog. We'll do the kind of wrap up, as you said, and then we'll start into season two. So if you're wanting to get a little ahead, so that way you can follow along with our conversations as they drop each Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, then you can do that with us. So yeah, thank you again for being with us through the entire season, or even if you're new to watching us, we are very appreciative of your eyes and ears on our vlog and hope that you'll come back next week.